My name is Shirish Netkev, and I represent Team Manatoko. Those of you who are familiar with Polynesian languages may recognize that Manatoko means to verify, validate, or give credence to. And we've sort of picked up that language because it's not something you can Google and find out what it means. So just make it a bit different from what other people may name their team. So going straight along, we are very fortunate to have in our team a group of technologists from SAS and Aberoon who have spent a lot of time on data engineering, pattern analysis, predictive modeling, and especially in the AML context. We also have legal entity identifiers from GLEIF, people like Carla and Peter, who have spent a lot of time and many years talking about the problems of verifiable credentials, decentralized digital identity, as well as digital certificates. Now, the other people in the team include crypto exchange folks like Caroline, who have done a lot of work on decentralized digital identities. And of course, we have a large depository institution who has built mature processes for KYC and AML. Now, the reason I mentioned that is because we bring together the thoughts of a lot of people who have spent many years associated with this problem and looked at it from a lot of different dimensions. So if we were to go over the agenda, I guess the most important aspect of the agenda is we put together kind of a word cloud of all the items that were discussed in our briefing meetings and also in our meetings related to the deep dives. And we sort of talked about how we should approach this. And we will going to go over this presentation with the problem, the solution, the what, and the how before we get into the Q&A. Now, let's sort of articulate the problem, or rather, the problem has already been articulated to us by the FDIC and FinCEN, and we kind of zeroed in on the aspect of it which says to measure the effectiveness of digital identity proofing. However, we wanted to highlight kind of one aspect of kind of the feedback that we got from different people in the industry. So, for example, a tech vendor will probably say, and a lot of them do say, that identity proofing is not a problem. You can do it in 4 minutes and it's a solved problem. Regulators and agencies say, well, it's an unsolved problem because you have points of vulnerability. Meanwhile, the banks, MSBs, and WASPs who represent the users of this are saying, how do we manage the risk of digital identity within our mandate for safety and soundness? Now, let's look a little bit into why we have this misconception, or you may call a disparity of opinion around this. And it's primarily due to the fact that most solutions deployed in banks today put systems or technology at the center, which in turn drives process, which puts kind of constraints on governance instead of the other way around. And we like to sort of embrace the approach that Gardner is talking about, where they say that orchestration of a solution is probably orchestration of technical components is probably more important than the technical components themselves, because the technical components can be swapped in and out to come up with a solution. So that's one aspect of the problem. The other kind of reality which kind of struck us was when Sean Evans from FinCEN talked about the criminal ecosystem. Now, this is very important because we all know that the bad actors are much more sophisticated in technology than what we could expect, and sometimes better than the good guys. But here's the important thing that came out is that the criminal ecosystem has lowered the level of technical sophistication required to commit financial crimes. And we are saying that a solution to that problem is for financial institutions to have an ecosystem which lowers the technical sophistication to prevent financial crimes. And this can be done by a combination of a few things. Ease of use, that means it has to be very easy to use by the extremities of the organization. The complexity, which can be handled by tech vendors, can be under the hood. And it needs to be supported by a robust ecosystem consistent of consortia, standards, as well as regulation. So if you were to articulate our problem in simple terms, we talk about being a orchestration of technologies and frameworks, those that are used to enrich technology, privacy preserving interoperability, orchestration for safety and soundness, and last but not least, quantification of vulnerabilities. Now, this is kind of a way where we talk about the insights shared across the ecosystem. This is kind of important because right now, a lot of banks and financial institutions are doing a lot of innovation, specifically in the area of unique private data or transaction behavior, verifiable credentials. All of that is being done in a siloed form. So there are silos of innovation. And we are advocating the sharing of these insights to a what we would call a CIP, system of insight, which can be accessible by multiple people, by multiple banks, based on which they can do forensic inquiry, predictive modeling, and risk-based processes. And the focus here again is on the user interface. The complexity is under the hood. The simplicity is for the user. And the benefits of this are kind of obvious, because this is where there was an example cited about 600,000 social security numbers having multiple users, multiple people assigned to them. We talk about, so if we have Dr. Jekyll having an account in one bank and Mr. Hyde having an account on the other bank, a forensic inquiry will show that they are one and the same person. They have the same birth date and the same address. There are ways in which we can do what is called an identification or entity resolution around that. And that's possible only through sharing of data. Similar things that can be done through insights in this kind of data aggregation are things like the $100 leakage. There was an example given by FinCEN about how a lot of people may have, let's say, $100,000 or $100 or $1,000 going in and out of their account, which they don't really respond to or they don't think much of and don't report. But when you add it up into a pattern, it actually means that they are being used as mules or in-betweens to launder money. Those are the kind of things which are aggregated through sharing of insights. Now, what I'd like to do is show you talk a little bit more about the interoperability. Now, interoperability, this is a picture given by Verite, which has investment from Circle, or which is promoted by Circle, and as well as by Coinbase. There is a lot to be said about the interoperability. Interoperability is what makes the ability to share data much easier while preserving privacy associated with it. Now, the privacy preserving technologies are complex, but they are there right now and can be used. But interoperability is the key to sharing of information and sharing of insights. Now, we've mentioned Circle and Verite here, but some of these insights are available, or technologies are available from Fido, OpenID, as well as W3. So it's not necessarily just one, but the important aspect of it that they should be persistent portable, they should be able to be resolvable and interoperable. Those are the characteristics which we will focus on as a part of, which we think are let's say, an essential part of what we want to achieve. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carla, who can give us her unique perspective from having done LEIs in the past. Carla, over to you.
Thank you, Shirish. So governance, particularly the level of care to be exercised and the risk profile of a financial product, service, or activity, will drive the requirements for the identification process. The process then can be leveraged with appropriate technologies to support existing legacy and future upgraded applications. The recommendations on this slide propose requirements to which financial institutions can aspire. The specific best practices address both considerations for the text print outlined with the problem statement. These are the bullets in bold, as well as go beyond by proposing additional best practices, which our team feels and regards as necessary to make concrete and lasting improvements to the identity verification of and engagement with clients of financial institutions. The team proposes that, along with heightened reliance on remotely delivered financial services, the need for higher levels of identity proofing or assurance will be required and will become the norm in the future. This especially is true looking forward to the adoption of zero trust frameworks, in which digital credentials will be issued and then used for identification and operational purposes. The team proposes then that work to improve identity proofing assurance should focus on achieving a baseline of IAL2 for most remotely delivered financial products, which can be delivered through a variety of technical protocols and solutions. Investing in a more stringent and rigorous level of identity proofing and assurance in the upfront process will allow for ongoing reliance on the validity of identity credentials, as long as the holders keep their keys safe, ensuring a cryptographically secure means of digital identification and verification. And now I will turn it over to John to focus more on the how of the improvements on digital identity proofing can be measured and achieved.
Thanks, Carla. We're now talking concretely about the how in the context of a market-ready roadmap of ideas for institutions to measure their identity proofing capabilities. Next slide. Our recommendation for a starting point that addresses a scalable, cost-efficient, risk-based solution to measure the effectiveness of digital identity proofing is to look at existing assessment tools that are already out in the public domain and are meant to answer, at some level, the very question we have been posed to answer in the sprint. For example, on the left, the World Bank along with the Digital Impact Alliance, and on the right, MITRE, each have very comprehensive self-assessment tested protocols and templates that leverage, for example, the NIST Identity Assurance Decision Tree to help an institution identify on a scale of low, moderate, or high how they are identifying identity proofing across many relevant categories, including their level of maturity, performance, scalability, adoption, security, and affordability. Going through this type of exercise will help, for example, a community bank understand what they are doing and where they have room to grow. These tools are free and accessible today. Next slide. Next, in terms of how to identify proof a solution is to measure how an institution is leveraging the cloud. While this is from the perspective of what Microsoft Azure supports, all cloud providers offer these types of cloud managed services, which all support plug and play, often with Kubernetes managing the orchestration and serverless containerization across virtually partitioned environments, which, back to the quote from Gartner, is an interoperable solution where point solutions that support identity proofing capabilities can be quantifiably measured and swapped out easily. These managed services also support tools for measuring NIST compliance and other identity proofing standards. Next slide. Cloud environments support cost-efficient and governed identity proofing solution frameworks. Financial institutions of all sizes are leveraging the cloud, at the very least in a hybrid fashion, for the most critical identity proofing services. For operating all of these services, orchestration is the key piece. Most of the tools used are open source, and when used as cloud managed services, it also reduces cost associated with development and maintenance. Our suggestion is to use cloud managed services where possible if the budget allows it, especially for orchestration. The solution that has worked for authenticating customers online has been risk-based MFA. Business rules must be consistently set up to ensure safety, soundness, and security of banking infrastructure. A cloud orchestrated infrastructure supports rapid deployment and management of these processes with a higher level of fidelity. Using compliant services from cloud providers will let us make sure business and governance rules are set up consistently throughout authentication services. Shirish, back to you.
Vulnerability rating. Now, this is kind of along the lines of, let's say, your CAMELS rating, which regulators are accustomed to for safety and soundness. But we did want to make this more of a self-assessment rule where everybody rates themselves on a 1 to 5 scale, and they do enough of peer benchmarking to see, so community banks will compare with other community banks, regionals will compare with other regionals, and VASPs will compare with other VASPs. And we are recommending this as a metric. So you can have a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the lowest, and you want to aim for something like at a 4 or a 5. 3 would be something will need improvement, and 1 and 2 is probably not acceptable from a vulnerability rating point of view. Now, these are just a few parameters we've used for. There will be some flexibility in terms of different parameters that we could use. Now, in summary, just want to summarize what we just talked about. We talked about continuous data enrichment from public and private information, which a lot of people are doing in silos. We're talking about sharing of insights across multiple organizations. We're talking about orchestration as being the primary aspect of a way of driving safety and soundness driven by governance. And last but not least, we talked about vulnerability ratings based on established methodologies and technologies.